Hi there. In this lecture we see Corzo against Capablanca in round 8 of their match in 1901. So e4, we see Capablanca playing classically as usual e5. He wasn't a fan of the Sicilian defence. He felt this was much more solid and the Sicilian defence was full of holes basically. We see knight c3, so a Vienna game, and we see knight c6, f4, and now Capablanca takes. Black actually threatens here, queen h4 check. So we have knight f3. If white ignores queen h4 check, yeah, black should play this check, and bishop c5 is strong, it threatens checkmate. If queen e1, yeah, black's just going to be better out of this opening and can hold on to f4. Knight d4 hits c2, and then just f6, and black is doing great here. So, also you might think, well, what about king e2? Then bishop c5 is still strong. Queen f1, knight f6. This is just a very, very strong position. There's knight d4 check, knight takes f3, d6. Black's going to have a big advantage here. If queen takes f3, again d6, this is dangerous, bishop g4 threatened. Here there's knight g4, which is actually, it's just really great for black. So yes, so knight f3 is played, shut down queen h4, fine, g5, we have h4, and now g4, knight g5, and now this reminds me of what I play against this in Blitz. I prompt this knight to do something, so guess what black plays here for 100 points. Yeah, just prompt the knight to do something, h6. We have knight takes, king takes. Now here, d4 was played. If bishop c4 check, d5 is interesting. This position, we can play f3, try and shut down the f file, and actually open up diagonals to white's king. So for example, g takes, because knight takes c7 check is harmless. In this position, with f takes, this is very dangerous for white. This position is a threat of bishop g4 check, and black gets an enormous position for that rook sack. This is absolutely crushing stuff. For example here, it's absolutely crushing. So yes, so let's imagine g takes, b5 is really strong. If bishop takes b5, queen d6, and we're basically trying to emphasize this diagonal. We're threatening things like queen g3 check. If rook f1 check, knight d4, this is super strong for black. This is a great position. If rook g1, queen h2, and then knight d4, this position is great for black. Yes, so it seems a bit of a dodgy opening here. So d4 is played though. White's played a bit of a risky opening. d5, e takes. If knight takes d5, black has the powerful bishop e6. What does white do here? If knight takes f4, we're taking out d4, a nice center pawn. If bishop takes f4, we're going to take on d5, and this is horrendous for white. Yeah, this is just no good. So, okay, so e takes d5 is played. Queen e7 check, king f2. Now the white king's put in a cage with g3 check. If king f2 wasn't played, if bishop e2, f3 is good. So g takes, you might think, well, what about the backfire with rook f1? Well, queen takes h4 check, and this position is very, very nice. So for example, like this, look at c2 now. It's a disaster for white, this kind of scenario. So, okay, king f2, and white's king's put in a prison, g3 check, king g1. And this has been prepared by Capablanca prior to this game. So he's an early preparer against opponents. If he thinks he had an advantage, he will find technical stuff All this in a non-engine era, of course, in 1901. But he finds an engine-like move here, which casts doubt on White's play. White's king is suspect. There's escape squares that have been taken out here. We don't want this to be about the f-file. We want it to be about these diagonals, whether like this or like this if the king was there. We want it to be about the diagonals. So guess what black plays here for 100 points? And lose 100 if you don't play it. The move I'm thinking of, the move that is played, is absolutely brilliant. Remember that black has the ability to counter-sacrifice a piece. White has already sacked a piece, so can black sack a piece? Yes. Expose these diagonals. Exploit the cage. Caging the white king. Knight takes d4. If knight d8, lose 100 points. Because bishop takes f4. And look, the f-file is kind of vicious. This is going to be quite vicious for us, this position, with that f-file. And all the pawns disappearing. So knight takes d4, cast out on this diagonal. It's a pretty sensitive diagonal. We have queen takes d4. Now you might be wondering, for the record, about this position. What about bishop takes f4? Yeah, here we can actually play queen f6. So even though we let g3 go, we let g3 go, we have bishop c5 with gigantic threats like double check, mating. If bishop f2, there's a really strong move here. I wonder if you can work it out. What does black play here, which is super strong, and why? There's more than one reason. So for 100 points, what would you play? Okay, we can play queen f6 just to vacate f6. And also, that's one reason, but also we're taking away that escape square. We're still eyeing f3. This is very difficult for white. So, for example, queen h5 check, this position, bishop f5, and here knight f6. What is white doing? This is just chaos. This is going to end up badly for white. This position is just bad for white. If g3, that's a total disaster, knight f3 check. And here, guess what we play for 100 points? Yeah, just knight takes h4 check. Looking at f2 now again. And this is just crushing. So yes, queen f4 in this situation, yeah, this shows that, you know, bishop takes f4 isn't such a great idea either. It's a difficult position for white. White's in trouble here. So trying to get rid of this cage of pawns with bishop takes f4. Yeah, it doesn't seem to work too well if black plays like this. It's pretty direct play. This vacational move, vacating f6, taking out escape square at the same time. Great stuff. We can do more than one thing with a single move. So yes, behind the scenes, bishop takes f4, not too hot either. So back to the game. Queen takes d4 was played. Queen c5. So this is kind of amusing. If, you know, queen takes, then this is mating. Look at this. It's mating. So white has to tread carefully after queen c5. This is not the only strong move, by the way. Even queen f6 is casting doubt on white's position. Maybe not as convincingly, but you know, this kind of scenario is pretty nice for black. What is white actually doing here? This is just desperate. We can actually not just rescue the rook, but dissuade bishop takes f4 with one go. Soon knight takes d3, and then this rook move, stop bishop takes f4 basically. And black's hugely better. If bishop takes f4, we're pinning that bishop and hitting them. Well, the knight's also kind of a problem, but we're hitting the bishop. That's the key thing. So okay, so queen c5 is played, and white tries knight e2. We have now queen b6 and the threat of bishop c5 now. So white plays queen takes b6. If b4, there is a tactical point to this. Queen takes, white can play c3, to be able to answer this check with knight d4. However, black has a big advantage here. This scenario does white no favours. The pawn on g3 is still maintained here. There's a lot of pain here for white. So this situation, for example, is just, white's struggling to get that pawn. This is not going away. So, okay, queen takes b6 is played. A takes, knight d4, bishop c5, c3, and now rook a4. So the threat is, I hope you can spot the threat for 5 points. It's, rook takes d4, to mate still. So we have bishop e2, bishop takes d4 check, c takes, rook takes d4. So still maintaining the cage pawns. b3, threatening to skewer the rooks if that's a threat. Knight f6, bishop b2. Now just rook d2. And we have bishop h5 check. So there seems to be, maybe there's a snag if king e7, maybe check. And then bishop takes f6. So Capablanca kind of refutes this stuff, though. Doesn't want to entertain this stuff. What does he play? Which settles down the position with a comfortable advantage, with zero controversy. So black to play here, zero controversy is definitely a philosophy of Capablanca, even at the age of 12 or 13. This is when he was 13. So what does black play for 100 points here? With the rook on the 7th, with these form pawns, black doesn't mind giving up the exchange. Knight takes h5. It extinguishes white's play. And now, beautiful coordination of pieces. f3 to give the knight f4. So threatening rook takes g2 as well, among other things. G takes, knight f4. We have bishop e5. And now rook g2 check. Some forcing moves, rook f2 check. King e1, if king g1, knight e2 is checkmate. So king e1, but now, 5 points. What does black play? It ends the game. Knight d3 check, just winning the bishop here. And in fact, we can do better than winning the bishop. g2 first, then take the bishop. This is just crushing with that passed pawn on f3. Also, white's king is in big trouble. Rook d2 mate threat, rook f1 threat. Rook d2 in particular needs to be addressed. This is just a hopeless position, essentially. So it's a crushing game. So the game actually ended on knight d3 check. We get a few lessons, both on the board and off the board. Modern players do not go and look at their games even with engines. We've got all this technology and we don't make the effort. Capablanca's in this match. He is trying to take the match seriously. He is playing the strongest player in Cuba. So he's finding improvements from previous games and finding stunning tactical resources. So he's really destroyed the opponent's opening here. Refuted the opponent's opening. This knight takes d4. Crushing tactical blow. It's wonderful stuff. Really wonderful stuff. So, okay. I mean, it shatters these diagonals and creates all sorts of pain points. And, in this situation, counter-attacking that piece, it just gives black a kind of non-controversial advantage. Black's just going into beautiful positions. And the one hint of being in trouble is extinguished in total style, just sacking the exchange. To reveal huge piece coordination. That's where there's no controversy when we're coordinating our pieces. In simplified positions as well, even though as humans we're not good usually at managing complexity, by simplifying, Capablanca's accuracy overall, from an engine perspective, this was a super accurate game. It's like only about 7 average centre pawn loss. Super accurate game played by black. Amazing stuff for someone just 13 years of age. I hope you enjoyed this as much as me. Thanks so much.